Nothing within the frame implies a need for change.
Nothing suggests a next moment.
Cause and effect appear to reconnect convincingly. Motionless continuity replaces gradual deviation.
Visual complexity reduces itself without signaling completion. Spatial logic reasserts itself without addressing its absence. Temporal markers lose relevance when repetition feels exact.
The scene feels sufficient in its current configuration.
Recognition replaces curiosity. The room no longer suggests progression or delay. The room appears ready to be observed again.
Orientation settles into a position that discourages further inspection.
The present moment no longer distinguishes itself from others.
Nothing appears unresolved.
Light resumes behavior that aligns with long-held expectations.
Stability persists without signaling duration.
Observation no longer produces discovery.
The environment offers closure without exploitation.
The environment stabilizes into a readable state.
The scene feels complete in a way that suggests recurrence.
Visual memory overlaps with current input.
Expectation begins to precede observation.
Temporal reference points begin to slide.
Alignment restores itself without explanation or acknowledgement.
The room behaves like a memory that has not finished forming. The moment feels present, but not current.
Recognition lags slightly behind perception.
Sequence becomes ambiguous when cause and result lose order.
Object and environment no longer feel perfectly simultaneous.
Conditions resemble stability closely enough to reduce the impulse to question them.
The present stretches without advancing.
Change appears to arrive late, as if buffered.
Time no longer asserts a single position within the room.
Visual cues reorganize into patterns that feel previously encountered.
Completion no longer follows change immediately.
Effects no longer conclude when their triggers pass. The room retains traces of prior visual conditions. Multiple moments appear to coexist within a single view. The scene gives the impression of having already occurred. Visual information appears to repeat itself instead of updating.
The scene feels slightly behind itself. Time cues diverge without collapsing the scene. The scene appears to be waiting for itself. The present moment feels slightly retrospective. Balance returns quietly, without resolving prior inconsistencies.
The room presents itself in a way that resembles an earlier moment, though no transition is observed. Illumination occasionally favors areas that are farther from its origin.
Directional consistency weakens without fully breaking.
Spatial logic bends without fully collapsing. Time begins to express itself through minor visual hesitation.
Surface cues multiply in ways that invite closer inspection.
The room continues to function, even as its logic becomes harder to account for.
Separation between form and surface becomes less distinct. Depth cues invert slightly, challenging habitual interpretation.
Alignment errors accumulate without producing immediate resolution.
The room communicates multiple temporal states without selecting one. Postural variation becomes noticeable when it lacks a visible cause.
Correspondence between objects and their effects becomes less precise.
Distance no longer predicts clarity.
Light distribution appears reversed, without indicating a clear source. The relationship between objects and their effects begins to feel temporally offset, rather than spatially incorrect.
Light sometimes organizes itself into patterns without clear intention.
Shadows usually soften inward, so this arrangement draws mild attention.
Orientation shifts begin to register as intentional rather than incidental.
Light appears to reference the object instead of the source.
Visual responses seem to arrive out of sequence rather than out of place.
Reflections can drift, though their reasoning is not always clear.
Causal direction becomes uncertain.
Expectation adjusts when familiar gradients reverse. Familiar hierarchies of light begin to lose priority.
Single sources rarely produce divided outcomes.
Orientation subtly influences how presence is perceived.
Brightness sometimes settles in places that do not immediately explain themselves.
Balanced lighting reduces visual effort and promotes comfort.
Nothing within the environment insists on interpretation or reaction.
Reflections shift subtly with angle and light intensity. Contrast naturally forms where structure interrupts illumination.
Surface contours become readable through controlled reflection.
Spatial cues guide perception without demanding conscious analysis.
The light behaves almost as expected, though its direction invites a moment of quiet reconsideration.
Clarity increases as contrast becomes more defined.
Shadow length adjusts gradually with the position of the light source.
Orientation shifts can occur subtly enough to escape immediate awareness.
Air presence is inferred through subtle diffusion, rather than direct observation.
Perception notices when alignment loosens without an obvious cause.
Gradual shifts in illumination support the impression of environmental stability. Light traces paths that reveal surface continuity.
Edges become less pronounced under evenly distributed light.
Object posture can appear variable without implying intention or consequence.
Material textures quietly reveal themselves through interaction with light.
Small positional corrections often occur without provoking conscious notice.
Brightness distributes itself across the room in a way that feels expected.
Shadows respond in quiet accordance with daylight, reinforcing expectations without drawing attention. The environment behaves within boundaries that feel physically reasonable and familiar.
Diffuse light reduces contrast and supports a sense of visual ease.
Contrast naturally forms where structure interrupts illumination.
Surfaces accept illumination according to their finish, creating subtle gradients that feel natural.
The space presents itself as complete and usable, offering no immediate reason to question how it is arranged or why it looks this way.
The floor responds to light in a way that suggests regular use and familiar material properties. Lighting appears to follow predictable physical behavior that supports the impression of a stable and ordinary interior.
Minor deviations in object alignment often register as incidental rather than intentional.
Shadows respond in quiet accordance with daylight, reinforcing expectations without drawing attention.